The airplane cabin buzzed with the sounds of conversation and the hum of engines as it soared into the sky, a metal tube filled with diverse passengers, each with their own stories and destinations. The air was thick with anticipation, but also an unspoken tension that lingered beneath the surface. Sunlight streamed through the small windows, casting warm hues on the faces of those on board. However, amid this shared journey, two individuals stood apart. A well-dressed black man sitting in his aisle seat and a white woman in the row across from him, her demeanor radiating impatience and entitlement. As announcements were made and flight attendants moved through the aisles, the woman fidgeted in her seat, her eyes darting around the cabin with a mixture of disdain and discomfort. The man exuded calmness, focused on his book, seemingly unfazed by the chaos around him. Yet, there was an underlying awareness. He could feel the weight of her gaze upon him, scrutinizing him as if he were an unwelcome intruder invading her space. The atmosphere shifted palpably when the plane began its ascent, elevating not just the aircraft, but also the tensions within the cabin. Little did anyone know that this flight would not just be a journey through clouds, but a tumultuous encounter that would expose deep-seated prejudices and reveal unexpected truths about identity and humanity. As the plane settled into its cruising altitude, the camera panned to the two central figures in this unfolding drama. The black man, Michael, appeared to be in his mid-30s, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit that hinted at both professionalism and confidence. His warm brown eyes held a calm intensity, suggesting a man who had faced challenges but remained grounded. A subtle air of authority surrounded him, evident in his posture and the quiet way he engaged with his surroundings. He was engrossed in a book about leadership, an indication of his dedication to self-improvement and growth. Across the aisle sat Karen, a woman in her late 40s with an air of entitlement that radiated from her every gesture. Dressed in expensive athleisure wear and adorned with flashy jewelry, she embodied privilege. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped impatiently against the armrest as she surveyed the cabin, her expression one of barely concealed disdain. She exuded a sense of superiority that seemed to grow as she focused her gaze on Michael. As the flight progressed, their contrasting worlds became increasingly apparent. Michael, with his composed demeanor and thoughtful engagement, represented resilience and strength, while Karen's haughty attitude revealed deep-seated biases. This stark juxtaposition set the stage for an encounter that would test not only their characters, but also the perceptions of those around them, an encounter that would soon spiral into an unexpected confrontation. As the plane reached its cruising altitude, the atmosphere shifted from a general buzz of excitement to a palpable tension. It began with a small, seemingly innocuous moment. Michael adjusted his seatbelt, inadvertently brushing against Karen's arm. She recoiled as if stung, turning sharply to face him with an expression that combined shock and indignation. "Excuse me, do you mind?" she snapped, her voice dripping with condescension. Some people have no respect for personal space. Michael looked up from his book, surprised by her sudden hostility, but opting for calmness. "I'm sorry if I startled you. It was unintentional," he replied evenly, attempting to diffuse the situation. But Karen wasn't finished. Her voice rose slightly, drawing the attention of nearby passengers. "I just don't understand how some people think they can sit so close to others without any consideration," she continued, her words laced with contempt. "Do you even belong here?" Michael's heart raced as the realization hit him. This was more than a personal slight. It was an attack rooted in prejudice. He took a deep breath, tried to maintain his composure amidst the growing whispers and glances from other passengers who were now fully engaged in the unfolding drama. "Everyone deserves respect, regardless of race or background," he replied firmly yet calmly, hoping to appeal to reason. But Karen scoffed at his words, her face flushing with anger as she prepared to escalate the confrontation further, setting the stage for an encounter that would reveal much more than just their differences. Michael felt a surge of emotions as Karen's words hung in the air, heavy with ignorance and hostility. Instead of retaliating with anger, he chose a different path. Drawing on his well of patience, he met her gaze with a steady expression, refusing to let her provocation unnerve him. "Look, I understand that flying can be uncomfortable," he began, his voice calm yet firm. "But we're all here together, sharing this space. It's important for us to treat each other with respect." He paused, letting his words sink in while he gauged the reactions of the passengers around them. Some nodded in silent agreement, while others leaned in closer, captivated by the unfolding exchange. Karen scoffed at his attempt at reason. Respect? You think you deserve respect just because you're sitting here? Maybe you should think about how you make others feel. She shot back, her tone sharp and defensive. Michael took a deep breath, aware that engaging in a shouting match would only escalate the situation further. I do deserve respect, he replied, maintaining eye contact, as does everyone on this plane, no matter their race or background. We all have stories that bring us here. He could see a flicker of confusion cross Karen's face as she struggled to process his calm demeanor amid her rage. Instead of allowing her to pull him into her emotional storm, he stood firm in his conviction. Dignity and respect were not negotiable. In that moment, he realized that responding with grace was a powerful statement against prejudice. As Michael maintained his calm, the tension in the cabin thickened, drawing more passengers into the unfolding drama. Whispers and murmurs rippled through the aisles as people exchanged glances, some curious, others visibly uncomfortable. The flight attendants, sensing the growing unease, paused in their duties, uncertain whether to intervene. Karen's frustration bubbled over as she felt the scrutiny of those around her. You think you can just lecture me? How dare you? She shouted, her voice rising above the hum of the engines. Her face flushed with anger, and her hands clenched into fists at her sides. I have every right to feel safe on this plane. Michael shook his head gently, attempting to maintain a sense of calm. No one is threatening your safety, he replied, his tone steady yet firm. This isn't about safety. It's about respect and understanding. But Karen was unwilling to back down. She leaned forward, eyes blazing with indignation. I don't need a lesson from you, she retorted sharply, now drawing even more attention from passengers. A few began to record the confrontation on their phones, capturing the moment for social media, a reality that added another layer of pressure to the situation. The atmosphere became electric with anticipation as some passengers began to take sides. A man in the back called out in support of Michael, while a woman closer to Karen echoed her sentiments, urging her to stand her ground. The cabin felt like a powder keg, ready to explode at any moment as emotions flared and lines were drawn amidst an unexpected clash of perspectives. Amidst the mounting tension, Karen's frustration morphed into a torrent of dehumanizing remarks, revealing the depths of her prejudice. Seizing the moment to assert her power, she leaned closer to Michael, her voice dripping with disdain. You people always think you can just play the victim, she sneered, her words slicing through the air like a knife. Why don't you try acting like you belong? Gasps rippled through the cabin as her words landed heavily on those nearby. Michael felt a wave of humiliation wash over him, yet he fought to keep his composure. The atmosphere shifted from mere tension to palpable anger as passengers reacted to Karen's blatant racism. Excuse me, he said, his voice steady but laced with incredulity. What do you mean by you people? This isn't about race. It's about basic human decency. But Karen was undeterred, her expression hardening as she doubled down. I just don't want someone like you sitting next to me, she declared, her tone dripping with entitlement. If you can't understand that, maybe you should rethink how you carry yourself in public. The cabin erupted into murmurs once more, with some passengers visibly shaken by her words, while others looked on in disbelief. Michael felt the weight of their eyes upon him, and though hurt by her attack, he reminded himself that he would not allow her ignorance to define him. Karen's comments had stripped away any pretense of civility, revealing a stark truth about societal biases that still linger beneath the surface. The flight had transformed from an ordinary journey into a battleground of beliefs and identities, where respect was being challenged in the most shocking way. As the confrontation escalated, Michael felt a wave of determination wash over him. He realized that this was not just a personal battle. It was an opportunity to challenge the prejudice that had been laid bare in the cabin. With the eyes of the passengers upon him, he decided it was time to reveal who he truly was. Before you make any more assumptions about me, perhaps you should know something, he began, his voice steady and resonant. The murmurs in the cabin quieted as everyone leaned in, eager to hear what he had to say. My name is Michael Johnson. I'm not just a random passenger. I'm a professional athlete, a community leader, and an advocate for equality. A ripple of surprise coursed through the cabin as people processed his words. The flight attendant, who had been observing from a distance, stepped forward, her eyes wide with recognition. "Wait, are you the same Michael Johnson who won gold at the Olympics?" she asked incredulously. "Yes, that's me," he replied, feeling a mixture of pride and vulnerability. The atmosphere shifted again as passengers began to whisper amongst themselves, some expressing admiration, while others looked at Karen with disbelief. The revelation transformed the dynamic in the cabin. The woman who had tried to belittle him now found herself cornered by her own ignorance. Michael's identity as a celebrated athlete had not only elevated his status, but also served as a powerful reminder that assumptions based on race could lead to profound misunderstandings. In that moment, the focus shifted from humiliation to recognition, a pivotal turning point in their tumultuous encounter. The revelation of Michael's identity sent shockwaves through the cabin, and the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Passengers exchanged glances, some with wide eyes of disbelief, while others nodded knowingly as they recalled his achievements. The murmurs grew louder, a mix of admiration and shock reverberating through the aisles. A woman seated 2 rows back leaned forward, her expression a blend of astonishment and regret. "I can't believe I was sitting near him all this time," she exclaimed to her companion, who nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, a man in a nearby seat piped up, "You have no idea how much you've inspired so many people, Michael. Thank you for your contributions." On the other hand, Karen's face drained of color as she processed the reality of what had just occurred. The very person she had tried to demean stood not only as a respected athlete, but also as a beacon for change and resilience. Whispers soon turned into outright conversations as passengers began to discuss their respect for Michael, with many expressing their regret over the way he had been treated. As Michael glanced around the cabin, he noticed several passengers giving him supportive nods and smiles, their expressions filled with empathy. The flight attendants, who had been watching with concern, approached him with an offer of complimentary drinks as a gesture of solidarity. Karen sat in stunned silence, the weight of her words pressing heavily upon her. The dynamic had completely shifted. What began as an attempt to belittle had transformed into a moment of collective realization about the consequences of prejudice and the importance of respect. In that cramped cabin high above the ground, a powerful lesson on humanity unfolded, one that would resonate long after the flight landed. As the reality of the situation sank in, Karen sat in her seat, frozen in disbelief. The initial rush of anger that had propelled her to confront Michael was now replaced by a deep sense of shame. She had aimed to assert her superiority, but instead, she found herself exposed, stripped of her defenses. The murmurs of admiration from Michael echoed around her, underscoring the stark contrast between him and the person she had chosen to berate. Each supportive comment from other passengers pierced through her self-righteous facade, forcing her to confront the prejudices that had driven her actions. She could feel their eyes on her, a mixture of judgment and pity, as they processed not just what she had said, but who she had become in that moment. In an attempt to regain some semblance of control, Karen glanced at Michael, searching for any sign of anger or resentment. Instead, she found him speaking with a few passengers who were eager to engage with him. Their faces lit up with respect and curiosity. It was a moment that made her realize how wrong she had been, not just about him, but about the assumptions she had carried for so long. A wave of regret washed over her as she thought about the impact of her words and the harm they could inflict. For the first time, Karen began to grapple with the discomforting truth. Her actions had consequences, and she had allowed ignorance to dictate her behavior. As the flight continued on its path, she understood that this moment would not only define how others saw Michael, but would also serve as a painful lesson in humility for herself, a chance to reflect and possibly change. As the flight neared its destination, a sense of reflection settled over the cabin. The earlier confrontation had transformed not only Michael's journey, but also the perspectives of those who witnessed it. Michael, now surrounded by supportive passengers, felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had turned a painful encounter into an opportunity for dialogue about respect and understanding, proving that dignity could triumph over prejudice. Karen, sitting in quiet contemplation, felt the weight of her actions pressing down on her. The exchanges around her had sparked an internal dialogue she could no longer ignore. She began to recognize that her words were not just harmful, but also revealing of her own insecurities and biases. It was a realization that stirred feelings of guilt and a desire to change. As the plane descended through the clouds, Michael took a moment to absorb the experience. He understood that while one person's ignorance could cause harm, it also presented an opportunity for growth, for both the individual and those who witnessed it. His heart swelled with hope that perhaps this incident would encourage others to confront their own biases and foster a culture of empathy and respect. When the plane finally landed, passengers began to disembark, and many approached Michael with expressions of gratitude and admiration. He smiled warmly, embracing their kindness. Meanwhile, Karen remained seated for a moment longer, contemplating how she might approach life differently moving forward. In that crowded airplane cabin, a powerful lesson had taken flight. A reminder that humanity thrives when we choose understanding over judgment and compassion over hate.